Hollywood has always been built on illusions. Painted sets became distant countries. Stunt doubles risked everything, so stars didn't have to. Costumes turned ordinary people into warriors, kings, or creatures of myth. But perhaps the most convincing trick wasn't fire-breathing monsters or collapsing buildings. It was height. On screen, leading men towered with authority. They looked like giants, filling the frame and commanding the story. But in reality, many of Hollywood's most iconic actors were surprisingly small in stature. Studios treated this as one of their most closely guarded secrets, creating an entire playbook of tricks to keep audiences convinced. Cameramen tilted lenses. Wardrobe elongated silhouettes. Sets were quietly altered. And sometimes, stars themselves stood on hidden boxes to sell the illusion. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 12 Golden Age actors who were shockingly short. These were men who stood far below the heights you'd expect, yet still became legends because presence, not inches, makes a star. Alan Ladd, the quiet storm who stood on air. Alan Ladd built his reputation on intensity. In this gun for hire in Shane, his stillness felt dangerous. He didn't need big gestures. His piercing eyes carried the weight. Audiences saw a leading man who seemed unshakable. Few realized he was only around 5 feet 6 inches, and possibly shorter. Paramount made sure nobody suspected. Their first trick was casting. Ladd was paired with Veronica Lake, who stood just 4 feet 11 inches. Together, they looked perfectly matched, and audiences never questioned it. When taller co-stars joined the cast, however, things got trickier. In Shane, director George Stevens literally dug trenches for actors like Jack Palance, so Ladd would appear taller in confrontations. Other times, hidden platforms, nicknamed Ladd boxes, were slipped under his feet. Cameramen shot him from slightly lower angles, making his figure seem more imposing. Wardrobe pitched in too. Pinstripes, high-waisted trousers, and custom shoes that discreetly added 2 to 3 inches. What makes Ladd fascinating is how these tricks shaped his style. He delivered lines with restraint, avoiding movements that might break the illusion. His acting became a masterclass in minimalism, where the less he did, the more powerful he seemed. As one director put it, the camera didn't measure his height. It measured his eyes. But where Ladd mastered stillness, another star built his legend on the opposite. Explosive energy that couldn't be contained. James Cagney, dynamite in a small package. James Cagney, standing only 5 feet 5, didn't look like Hollywood's typical tough guy. But watch The Public Enemy or White Heat, and you'll see why audiences forgot about the tape measure. Cagney moved like a firecracker, bursting with nervous energy, quick to lash out, unpredictable. Warner Brothers gave him support with technical tricks. Casting often placed him beside actors of similar height. Directors staged face-offs on staircases or platforms so he had the advantage. Cinematographers developed the Cagney angle, a slightly low shot that added a sense of dominance without being obvious. Still, Cagney didn't rely on tricks. His physical energy was the real illusion. He bounded across sets, punched the air with rapid-fire gestures, and spat dialogue at a breakneck pace. The result? Audiences never had time to compare his size. They were too busy keeping up with his velocity. Warner Brothers inflated his official height in publicity materials, claiming 5 feet 9 inches. Cagney just laughed. "I don't care how tall I am," he said. "I care about whether I can act." His confidence turned inches into an afterthought. But where Cagney relied on fire, another star mastered intimidation by doing the opposite, staying still and letting psychology do the work. Edward G. Robinson, When Power Sits Down. Edward G. Robinson wasn't tall. At about 5 feet 5, he lacked the physical dominance Hollywood expected from its gangsters. Yet, in Little Caesar and Double Indemnity, he became terrifying. His trick wasn't height, it was control. Directors positioned Robinson strategically. Often, he sat behind a desk while taller actors stood before him. The setup flipped the power dynamic. Robinson commanded from his seat, and others were forced to look down, but feel small. He also mastered personal space. Robinson leaned into scenes, invading co-stars' comfort zones, making them shrink back, even if they were taller. Add to that his clipped, forceful voice, and suddenly 5'5" looked like 6 feet of menace. The studio guarded his secret. His official biography claimed 5'9", and journalists were carefully managed. Interviews often took place with everyone seated, so comparisons couldn't be made. Critics later noted that Robinson's size may have added depth to his roles. His gangsters felt more dangerous precisely because they had to outthink and out-intimidate bigger men. As one director put it, he didn't need height. His voice alone made him 10 feet tall. And yet, not every short star hid the truth. Some built entire careers on embracing it. None more than Mickey Rooney. At 5'2", Mickey Rooney was one of the shortest major stars in Hollywood history. Yet, in the late 1930s and 40s, he was MGM's #1 box office draw. Rooney's small size worked in his favor early on. He convincingly played teenagers into his 20s, anchoring the Andy Hardy series that made him a household name. His youthful appearance, combined with energy and charisma, turned him into America's favorite boy next door. But as Rooney aged, his height became more of a challenge. MGM stepped in with every trick in the book. Custom shoes with thick lifts, carefully chosen camera angles, and costumes designed to elongate his frame. Cinematographers even used lighting to stretch his shadow on walls, creating a subliminal sense of height. Later in his career, Rooney leaned into the joke. He appeared alongside much taller actresses, letting the contrast add humor. Instead of fighting the perception, he adapted, which kept him relevant across 8 decades in film and television. Rooney once said, "I'm not a tall man, but I stand among giants," and considering his longevity, he wasn't wrong. But perhaps the most debated case of all belongs to the man who defined the phrase tall, dark, and handsome, without being tall at all. Humphrey Bogart, the myth that couldn't care less. Humphrey Bogart, immortalized in Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon, was officially listed as 5'10". In truth, he stood closer to 5'8". Some insist even 5'6". Either way, he wasn't the imposing figure his image suggested. When paired with Ingrid Bergman in Casablanca, who stood a striking 5'9", producers panicked. The solution? Bogey boxes, discrete platforms slipped under his feet during scenes. Careful blocking ensured Bergman was often seated while Bogart remained standing. Cinematographers adjusted shadows and angles, subtly elongating his silhouette. Wardrobe helped too. Tailors crafted suits with vertical details and high waistlines to make him appear longer. His slightly hunched posture, which became iconic, conveniently disguised differences when standing next to taller actors. What's remarkable is how Bogart's limitations defined his acting style. He avoided grand movements that would reveal height discrepancies. Instead, he leaned on voice, expression, and stillness. That restraint became his trademark, and one of Hollywood's most copied performances. As director John Huston said, "When Bogart entered a room, you felt it before you saw him." That kind of presence can't be measured in inches. By the time Dustin Hoffman arrived decades later, Hollywood had changed, but the height dilemma hadn't disappeared. Dustin Hoffman, the modern underdog blueprint. Dustin Hoffman, at 5'6", faced the same questions as earlier generations. Could a man of below-average height carry a leading role? His answer was The Graduate, 1967. Director Mike Nichols turned Hoffman's stature into an asset. Opposite Anne Bancroft, his smaller frame amplified the awkwardness of his character. Instead of hiding his height, the film embraced it, making it part of the story's tension. Hoffman continued this pattern. In Midnight Cowboy and Kramer vs. Kramer, his smaller build reinforced his image as an underdog, an ordinary man fighting against larger forces. Traditional tricks still appeared: platform shoes, low camera angles, but they supported the narrative rather than erasing the truth. Hoffman himself joked, "I think being short helped me." I had to find other tools. Audiences admired him for that honesty, and it opened doors for a new kind of leading man. But long before Hoffman, another performer solved the height issue by moving too fast for anyone to measure him. Danny Kaye. Comedy in constant motion. Danny Kaye, about 5 feet 7 inches, wasn't especially short by normal standards. But in Hollywood, especially when paired with tall co-stars like Bing Crosby, his stature stood out. His solution was brilliance. Constant motion. In The Secret Life of Walter Mitty and the Court Jester, Kaye sang, danced, and joked so quickly that audiences never had time to compare him physically to others. His energy became the distraction. Wardrobe and camera tricks still helped, particularly in romantic scenes where he needed to look taller. But Kaye was also self-aware. On the set of White Christmas, he joked, "Between Bing and me, we average out to the perfect height." His compact frame even benefited his dancing and physical comedy. He was agile, coordinated, and able to perform routines that taller, less nimble actors couldn't. His size became part of his gift. Not every actor used humor, though. Some, like George Raft, turned small stature into silent menace. George Raft, The Menacing Stillness. George Raft, 5'7", made his mark in gangster roles in Scarface and Each Dawn I Die. Unlike Cagney's explosive energy or Kaye's rapid-fire comedy, Raft relied on stillness. His background as a dancer gave him precision. On screen, he barely moved, just a shift of the eyes, a subtle tilt of the jaw. That economy made him seem controlled, calculating, and dangerous. Studios supported him with the usual tools: shoes with lifts, pinstriped suits, carefully chosen co-stars. But Raft's menace came from confidence. Critics observed that he didn't need to loom over anyone. His stillness made him scarier than taller actors who shouted to be intimidating. And if Raft embodied danger, Sal Mineo represented the opposite: fragility wrapped in intensity. At 5 feet 6 inches, Sal Mineo became iconic in Rebel Without a Cause as the vulnerable teenager torn between loyalty and loneliness. His smaller frame emphasized his fragility, especially alongside James Dean. As Mineo aged, Hollywood grew less forgiving. Height that once helped him play teens became a barrier to adult roles. Studios leaned on lifts, hair volume, and blocking tricks, but his size limited casting opportunities. Still, Mineo's performances carried intensity. He conveyed vulnerability one moment, then fierce emotion the next. That contrast, small stature, big presence, made him unforgettable, even if Hollywood failed to give him the roles he deserved. By contrast, Sammy Davis Jr. proved you could be among the shortest stars in history and still feel the tallest on stage. Sammy Davis Jr. was just 5 feet 3 inches, yet he stood taller than almost anyone when the spotlight hit. Singer, dancer, actor, comedian, he did it all, often better than those twice his size. He wore elevator shoes and styled his hair high, but his talent drowned out the illusion. On stage with the Rat Pack, Davis moved constantly, drawing all attention to him while taller men lounged in the background. He wasn't afraid to joke about it either. "I may be looking up at you physically," he once quipped, "but musically, you're looking up at me." Frank Sinatra put it simply, "Sammy may be short in inches, but he's a giant in talent." And then there was Burgess Meredith, whose voice carried him far beyond his 5'5" frame. At 5 feet 5, Burgess Meredith was no one's idea of a towering figure. Yet as Rocky's trainer Mickey, or Batman's Penguin, he projected authority that felt larger than life. Directors occasionally boosted him with platforms or low angles, but Meredith's true weapon was his voice. Resonant, precise, and commanding, it gave him presence that transcended height. His posture and carefully measured movements reinforced the illusion of control. Critics noted that even in quiet roles, Meredith commanded attention. He didn't overcompensate. He mastered restraint. And that subtle power made him unforgettable. Finally, we come to Frank Sinatra, who proved that confidence itself can be taller than any co-star. Frank Sinatra, officially listed around 5 feet 7 inches, may have been slightly shorter in reality. Studios gave him lifts and flattering angles, but Sinatra didn't need them. His aura came from confidence. He carried himself as if the room already belonged to him. His voice sealed the illusion, making fans believe in his power before they even saw him on screen. Unlike many stars, Sinatra wasn't bothered by being seen next to taller women. His marriage to Mia Farrow, who stood 5 feet 9, made headlines. But Sinatra leaned into it. He didn't hide. He knew presence wasn't measured in inches. As one director put it, Frank had something far more important than height. He had presence, and the camera always knew it. The illusion behind the curtain. On Golden Age sets, height management became an art form. Cameramen dipped lenses to steal inches. Costume designers stretched silhouettes with stripes and proportions. Sets were built with raised floors or dug trenches to balance actors. Every department pitched in. Casting directors chose shorter actresses to keep leading men tall. Publicists inflated stats in press releases. Wardrobe and lighting reinforced the image. It wasn't one trick. It was an orchestra of illusions. And it worked. Audiences never doubted what they saw. Why height didn't matter in the end. Looking back, the irony is clear. The very limitations studios worked so hard to hide often shaped these actors' legendary styles. Cagney's fire distracted from inches. Bogart's restraint turned into iconic cool. Robinson's psychological dominance rewrote intimidation. Rooney's adaptability made him last decades. Davis's showmanship erased measurements altogether. Sinatra's confidence made numbers irrelevant. Hollywood demanded tall heroes, but time proved that presence, talent, and charisma were the only measurements that mattered. To conclude, how tall is a legend? The camera lies. It always has. But the greatest illusion wasn't making a 5'6" man look like 6 feet. It was convincing audiences that height didn't matter at all. From apple boxes to trench floors, Hollywood built myths out of inches. But what people remember are the performances. The voices, the stares, the energy, the things that can't be measured. So how tall does a legend need to be? Just tall enough to live forever on screen. Which of these stars surprised you the most? Did you ever notice the subtle tricks, platforms, stairs, low angles, hidden in plain sight? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed uncovering Hollywood's secrets, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that pull back the curtain on classic cinema.